Welcome to Jazz Zone Together. Today, we are thrilled to welcome a highly successful writer, performer, and jazz educator, Mike Tomaro. Mike spent 18 years as part of the Army Blues, the jazz unit of the U.S. Army Band. He currently serves as Director of Jazz Studies at the Mary Papert School of Music at Duquesne in Pittsburgh. Now, I'll turn the mic over to Dick Dunscomb to conduct the interview with Mike. Dick, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. And as you mentioned, this is a very special one. Mike is so well known and so prolific in all the things that he does. And this is going to be very informative for our audience. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks, Dick. Great to be here. I'm so pleased you all asked me to do this. Thanks.
Well, it was absolutely important that we get it in. And thank you for doing it.
Sure.
Now, let's start with your early years. We knew you grew up in Pennsylvania. What were your early years like, and how did that shape your career into music?
So I was in this wonderful situation of being in a small town with directors who were very aware of students, children, whatever, who had an aptitude for the music. By the time I was in sixth grade, I had played my first solo with a concert band in sixth grade. And this is something in today's days, this would never happen because you would have parents up in arms. But in my time, it was amazing because from sixth grade on, I was featured in every single concert. Not just a little thing like me standing in front of the band playing a solo. The directors were that kind of aware of my aptitude for the music. And so up to sixth grade, I was, I started playing saxophone because my dad was a big fan of Boots Randolph. That was the only reason that saxophone was chosen. So dad liked Boots, I liked Boots too. That was fine. And so, I just, kind of played my horn. In seventh grade, my teacher, who was a saxophonist, played Charlie Parker's Lover Band for me. And it clicked. There's something about it. I've heard so many stories from other guys that talk about there's this moment whenever it clicks, and that was it for me. That was it. I was hooked for some reason. And like I said, at that point, all those directors, all the way up from the elementary school to the high school, all knew about me and what my abilities were, and they pushed me. And so they allowed me to be in groups. By the time I was in high school, I was actually playing with the band directors. They had a gigging band on the weekends. I was playing with them. I was playing with a wedding band. I was playing with society bands. There were two in our little town of Connellsville. There were two society bands, and I was playing with both of them. And the other thing that was interesting too is the high school band director. He was kind of going through a bit of a personal situation, trying to figure out if he wanted to continue being a band director or not. He actually had a history minor and was trying to decide whether he wanted to get out. I think he just gotten burnt out. That's a pretty typical thing that happens with band directors, especially at the high school level, doing everything. And he kind of almost turned the reins over to me and let me run the jazz things, as a kid. And so as an arranger, this is where the arranging thing started too. In my junior year, I had I think it was a four-horn group. By the time I was in my senior year, I had a five-horn group with four singers that I was writing all the charts for. Really had no idea what I was doing. I was just guessing at it. Luckily everything worked. And again, small town, how hip this was, that would never happen these days, is the school district actually allowed my band, all 12 of us, I guess, with the singers, to actually get out of school for the day. And we actually toured around the school district presenting concerts, the elementary schools and junior highs. Incredible. Just the idea of it was kind of like being unleashed. I think that's one of the most amazing things that happened to me is they saw my aptitude and they just said, let's let this kid go. And man, it was the greatest for me, And I still, and another very defining moment for me was going to, at that time, West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia, had a fine arts camp that was 3 weeks long. Much like the really great fine arts camps that are happening these days. A lot of, it's difficult to sustain in most cases these days. But at that time, that's whenever I learned there was so much more besides my little Connellsville thing going on. I met all these kids from West Virginia, from all over West Virginia, who were very talented. And that opened my world up I'm in contact with some of those folks even to this day, which is really, really cool. That I look forward to that I did that every summer from ninth grade into the 10th grade on through my high school graduation. And so I look forward to seeing these folks every summer, and we made music together. And just like I said, it was really great because it got me out of Connellsville, and I realized how much was out there, you know. So it was really just marvelous, you know. And then Duquesne was great too. I mean, continuing on into Duquesne. I had a wonderful gentleman who was the director of bands, not just the jazz band player, but his name is John Wilson. John is still with us today. Wonderful. In fact, I co-wrote the arranging book that we have out with him. And John was a mentor to a whole bunch of us. Marty Ashby, who you and I have mentioned just previous to actually starting the interview. I'll mention Marty a little later, but we all consider John Wilson a mentor, and John Wilson was like that to me. He saw my potential too. So this continued. Whenever I was a freshman, I actually went up to John, and I peeked my head into the door to the jazz ensemble rehearsals, and I wasn't in the jazz ensemble at that time. I didn't really think I was capable of doing it, but I saw that they needed a baritone player, and I actually went up to John Wilson as a freshman little kid and said, "Hey, I'd really like to play in your band." And I said, I promise if you let me in the band, I promise I'll work my ass off. And John remember the reason I even tell you that is because John remembered that 4 years later at my senior recital, he actually gave that particular quote about things. And so I worked my way up. Like I said, I never took private lessons from John, but all of us, if you mention to anybody who's from the Pittsburgh area who worked with John Wilson, we talk about him being a mentor because he was one of those people who he was hard in a very good old school way on all of us. Okay, this is what you need to know. And well, it was just a marvelous time with him. And like I said, I stayed in touch with John all the way through my military career, and I got back here, and when we worked together, like I said, wrote a book together. So that was kind of the early thing. And I suppose to continue on to the Army, which will lead us in the next section, I suppose, is that the Army gig came up almost by accident. So this is 1979. I'm a senior at Duquesne, and music education major. And was trying to decide, well, am I going to teach or not? And so that was my degree. So I was doing my student teaching, and over the break between the fall semester and the spring semester, I had taken my audition for the Army band. It was an opening that had come up, and I just saw it as a sheet of paper on my saxophone teacher's door. We didn't have social media in those days or email or anything like that, so it got about snail mail. So this sign was up on the door. Army ceremonial band, get paid to play 3 years commitment. I said, this is interesting. I said, even though I was an education major, I shouldn't say that my heart wasn't into it, because I certainly would have been an educator in that manner, but I really wanted to play, and I played the whole time through my career. So I thought, well, let's give this audition a try. And I was one of, and this is interesting for the younger players out there who are auditioning for these bands today. In that day, whenever I auditioned, there were 5 people who auditioned for the spot. That's all. Okay. Now, one of the reasons is to explain this to the younger folks too. So we're still dealing with sort of the fallout from Vietnam. And so it's not the coolest thing to be in military bands. In fact, my friends, whenever I auditioned, my friends said, "You're going to do what?" I said, "Look, it looks like they're going to pay me to play, man." I had aspirations to head to New York, like most everyone did at that time. I had my woodwinds together. I was going to try to, go up to New York. I said, well, I'll practice for 3 years and head up to New York. And so I sort of barely made it through my my student teaching, but I made it and graduated. Immediately I graduated on May 10th, 1980 from Duquesne University. And on May 20th, 1980, I went into basic training. And that leads, yeah, right. Yeah. Not a lot of time. Mom was not too happy about that. So she was sad to have her firstborn leave. So but that takes us into the Army career. So it was, so my early career was just, again, I look back and just feel so gifted that, I was given all these opportunities to do all these things. I think, and we know it's difficult these days because the idea of inclusion, and I agree with inclusion, but I also I'm a big fan of recognizing talent and making sure you push that talent. It's not everybody is a player on the field. You have to recognize those folks who have the extra talent. So.
Yeah, that's a great path. Before we go back to your return to Duquesne, can you share with us some of the stories and highlights of your 18-year career with the blues?
Sure. Well, so that again, another interesting situation. I didn't even know. So the blues, I had just looked this up. I didn't realize this. The blues had only been 1980. I got actually arrived at Fort Myer in Washington D.C. The Army Blues had only been in existence about 7 or 8 years before that, something like that. So it was a relatively small band. I didn't even know. Whenever I auditioned for the Army, I didn't even know there was a jazz band. The Army Blues is the youngest of the military jazz bands in D.C. and didn't even know. And so I was out doing a ceremony, which that's the typical thing in the military, is to enter as part of the ceremonial band. And so I auditioned as a classical saxophonist who played some jazz and got that position, and was coming in from some ceremony one day, and I heard a jazz band. I said, wait a second, what's this? I had no idea. And I walked in and I saw, there's a jazz band here. I have to get into this. This is going to be much better than playing these ceremonies in 100-degree weather in a wool uniform. So sort of the same thing. I chatted up a couple of guys in the band, and I ended up being on the sub list whenever everybody would go on vacation in the summer. I got to start subbing with the band. And that's actually when my writing career really took off. Whenever I was in college, even though I was playing, I really didn't write. I had a very good friend. In fact, you guys are aware of Eric Richards, the great writer Eric Richards. Eric and I are best of friends. We were in school together. In fact, we just got to work together a few months ago doing an all-state thing together. But Eric was such a great writer. I think I didn't even want to go there because he was so much better than I was, and so I didn't even approach it. But I looked at the Army Blues gig and I thought, here's one way to prove, I'm more than just a player. So I thought, well, I'll write some music for them. So I started to write charts and kind of, because the only person writing for the band in those days was Mark Taylor. Mark, of course, such a prolific career, one of my dear friends too. And so I started to kind of experiment. Here I have this wonderful opportunity, and this is an 18-year highlight for me, having a band to write for. I mean, how amazing is that? I mean, who wouldn't take advantage of that? And so I started to write for the band, just a couple things, and one of the gentlemen left, and they put me in, and so I became a member of the band at that time. And so that spawned the whole idea of me being a writer, because again, there was a band to write for, and I don't want to say competition with Mark, but there was the idea, hey, there's this guy who writes, I should write too. I really want to contribute stuff to the band. And so I mean, the highlights, I mean, like working, I mean, one of the big highlights I have to say, which is not necessarily a one-time thing, is working with those guys. To have that situation where I actually lived with the gentleman in the big band for 18 years, essentially an unchanged situation. We had a few folks retire during that time, but not that many. And so these guys who I lived with and, had fun with and made great music with, and we gigged on the weekends together. So that's the big one for me, and having a band to write for. But I mean, we had such guests here. I had to jot some names down here to remind me. We got to work with the New York Voices, which is great, and that led to an interesting connection for me back whenever I got to Pittsburgh. Clark Terry guested with the band. Frank Foster guested with the band. We got to perform some music from the Ellington Sacred Concerts in the National Cathedral, which was just amazing, going into that place and doing that. 1991, we performed at the Montreux Jazz Festival, and again, that in and of itself that's a great thing, because that's such a big organization. Now, we certainly weren't on the main stage, but to go there and be amongst all of that amazing music was huge. And then playing at the conventions. I mean, that's where Dick, that's where you and I met, and Bob, you and I met at those conventions too. At the Midwest convention, the IAJE conventions. Those were all great. At that point in the band's history, we hadn't done a lot of work with guest soloists. So as far as names to drop, there aren't a lot of them. But like I said, the band itself for me was the highlight. That was 18 years of having, dear friends. Again, folks, I'm going to see these guys in July. The guys I was with, I do the National Jazz Workshop every year in July. and I'm going back down, and we're going to do some performances together. So that was such a life changer for me in my young years, you know, from 1980 to 1997, 98, being in that band with those folks. It was just a marvelous career. And in retrospect, you don't think of it whenever you're down there, because it's so, everybody's in the military down in DC, you know, and so you don't think about it. It's not, and even actually to go outside of the jazz realm, we were all part of the ceremonial band. The ceremonial band was certainly the big conglomeration that was available to play military parades and funerals and ceremonial wreath layings at Arlington Cemetery. And so I got to play those for heads of state from around the world. I got to play for 3 presidents. And, you know, like I said, it's a, whenever you're in the middle of it, it's just like, okay, it's what we're doing today. And then after you leave, you realize the significance of all that. And just like I said, you go like, wow, this is incredible what I just got finished doing. So.
Well, you did it very well.
Oh, thanks.
You bet. And now you mentioned 97. That's when you came back to Duquesne, right? And
Yes.
took over the jazz band and the jazz program.
Yes.
Now, they had success in the past, but nothing compared with what you brought to them. What are some of the key ingredients that have kept that program on the top of its game?
Well, I think to whenever I got there, the program needed some reorganization. John Wilson, again, the mentor I just mentioned, John had been doing this for quite some time, and John was at the end of his career. And so it just sort of needed a little bit of a transfusion of some fresh blood. So whenever I got in there, I did some reorganization, John had worked within the system as much as he could as far as forwarding the jazz situation, the jazz program at Duquesne. And so I was able to go in and add a few more necessary classes. We just, you know, here I am in my 25th year there, and we just, in the past 3 or 4 years, just got this amazing faculty together. I had been working on this for several years, and it was just difficult. We've had an interesting time. We've always had great bands. I've always been very thrilled with my students and the faculty we've had, but it took a while to build the program up to the point where it is. And so we're at the point now where we finally have a master's in jazz performance and a bachelor's in jazz performance. It took a while, but I feel we did it right. And I don't think I would have instituted those degrees until we had the proper faculty in place. I was able to amass the absolute best in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is such a great jazz town. It has an amazing history. Stanley Turrentine, Art Blakey, George Benson. I mean, the list is absolutely huge. And so we continue that tradition at Duquesne, being an urban university. The students are in the middle of everything. We aren't, there's some other great universities that are relatively close to us, but we are the urban university. So we're right downtown. Our students have access to the clubs to perform. They have access to us. We're a situation, and this worked for me whenever I was a kid, being a big fish in a small pond. Both of these situations, small fish, big pond, big fish, small pond, both of these situations work depending on who the person is. For me, the idea of being a big fish in a small pond was great because I got so much one-on-one attention. And that's what we do at Duquesne to this day. Our faculty members, our jazz faculty members are there all the time. The students see them in the clubs. They see them at school. They see us performing. We have a concert series, a faculty concert series we do. So they see us not only as teachers, but they see us as a functional group. And so I've been just delighted having these folks. And I should name them, it would be a shame not to. J.D. Chasten, who's a wonderful young musician who came out of the Duquesne program as a trumpet player. Jeff Bush, who came from, actually he's a local guy, went to the Manhattan School of Music, played with Harry Connick, great trombonist. Eric Susoff is a wonderful guitarist in town. Max Leake on piano, Paul Thompson on bass, Tom Wendt on drums. Just these guys are the creme de la creme of the jazz musicians / educators in town. And they're the best. They're the best. And I same thing. I'm overjoyed to have a group of guys to work with and write for on a steady basis and perform with the students. So and the students see our exuberance. It's none of these guys is blasé about what they do. They're very serious and not overburdening. Everybody has a very positive attitude. I was trying to be very selective who I would have on faculty with me. So yeah, they're the best.
Yeah, it's a great program for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Now, you're also the director of the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra and its related programs. Tell us about that group.
So that group was a wonderful present for me. Sean Jones came to town as Sean was on his way up the ladder. He stopped at Duquesne for a few years. We were able to hire him. In fact, it was an amazing thing getting Sean on faculty. I had heard word that there was this phenomenal trumpet player who was at Youngstown State who could play anything. And I wrangled him with the help of a gentleman named Nelson Harrison, who's a trombonist in town here. And we were able to get Sean with us. So Sean, because of his connections in the jazz world already to this point, was able to institute the proper Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra. The Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra was originated many, many, many years ago by the great Nathan Davis, who taught at the University of Pittsburgh. And it had gone dormant for no particular reason, except that I'm sure that Nathan was just busy with many other things. And so Sean actually spoke with Nathan and got his blessing to actually continue the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra in its true name. And so Sean asked me to be on as the musical director, co-musical director. And of course, that was thrilling for me. Again, having another big band to write for. And so that turned into an amazing situation. I mean, I would write all the time for the band. We had lots of just amazing concerts. We've had Jimmy Heath been with us, Benny Golson. Benny Golson, if anybody ever talks to the members of the band, we'll cite Benny Golson specifically because he is, and I know you guys know Benny. He is such a gentleman, and his vocabulary. He wrote us this letter after the performance, and I'm having to sit there with a dictionary and thesaurus trying to see what he's saying, But he was so complimentary. It's like, oh man, that's the greatest feeling in the world whenever a legend like that, gives you praise, So we did that. And and then we also brought Jeff Tane Watts back, who was a Pittsburgher, to play with the band. Phenomenal. And so to get to write for that band as I do now is again, this is amazing for me because as a writer, that's the motivating factor right there. If you have a concert coming up, great, I'm going to write some music. Otherwise we just kind of sit. I mean, during the pandemic, so many of us dealt with this. I said, okay, I should really be writing some music, but it's like I have no one to write for, so I didn't write, and I was so mad at myself. But I found out that everybody went through that exact same situation. And the other thing that happened for me too, which sparked another whole different thing. Well, actually, I forgot. Yeah, one more thing too, before I talk about this other group. We recorded a Christmas album, of which I wrote most of the music on there, and it did really very, very well, really well reviewed. A lot of people come up to me to this day and mention how much they enjoyed the music. It's a lot of fun to write that. But one of the interesting things economically that was spawned off the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra is we have a little big band version of it. And that's become such a pet project for me. Hal Leonard has been putting out these little big band charts out for several years now. And I was writing them for the publishing company, never having an actual little big band to write for professionals. And all of a sudden, economics, dealt us the idea. It's like, well, let's try to go with a 10-piece version of this big band and see what happens. And so I started to write for that. And that's my favorite group to write for. That's such a great puzzle. After having written for a big band as long as I have, to try to take that same idea now, how do I pare that down, and who do I, it's a whole new puzzle now. I had the 18-piece big band puzzle. Now it's the 10-piece big band puzzle. How will this all fit together, and how can we create the same excitement with 10 people? So that's been a major thing for me as far as keeping things fresh from a writing standpoint. In fact, we have a couple gigs this summer. I'm looking forward to writing some new stuff for the band.
You, in your writing career, have become a very successful published writer, and you write charts for educational groups as well. Right. What does it take to be a successful published writer?
That's an interesting situation these days because one of the things that I always say is we've almost done too good a job as jazz educators now because everybody's a writer. However, everybody's writing very artfully, and I think everybody should write artfully. That's a very important thing. But the idea of providing music at the educational level is incredibly important. Actually, and not just it would be great if I could publish all the Pittsburgh Jazz Orchestra charts that I've written. But the idea of writing music so that we teach the younger students the proper way to play, I take that very seriously. Whenever I talk to my arranging students, we talk about specific ways to write, and I'll tell them, it's clarity, clarity, clarity. Every writer will say that who teaches in the educational system. And so writing for publication, the idea of clarity is so important. And you still try to be as musical as you possibly can, but we're educating as well as entertaining the students with the music that they will play to entertain their parents and friends. But it's the publishing company is in an interesting situation right now with coming out of the pandemic, as everybody is. Numbers are down for everyone, and so we're trying to get back up. And so it was interesting. Now, I wasn't involved in this, but I thought it was really interesting. The publishing companies made a very smart move and started working with the whole flex band situation like concert bands did, because we're still dealing with that. I've been out now for the, let's see, last year was a pretty good year. This past year was a pretty good year. I was out seeing lots of high school and junior high bands, and it was interesting to see the holes in the band, right? And how they've had to try to fill them with alternative instrumentation. And so thank goodness that whole flex band thing started to happen, because it'll take, we know it's going to take a few years for things to get back up to speed again. But for right now, and again, I guess to put a positive spin on this is that because of the fact that there weren't enough trombonists in the band, now a French horn player has played jazz who may have never done that before if the band had not, or a bass clarinet player or anyone in the band, right, who hadn't played any jazz before because they didn't play saxophone, trumpet, or trombone. Now they have that opportunity. So there's definitely a positive that came out of this whole thing. And I know we all look forward to things building back up to where they were, because boy, we were screaming, man. We were trugging away, before all that went down.
So you also are a tremendous performer, and you've had a lot of major success. Share a few of the highlights from that side of your career.
Well, this is where I have to mention Marty Ashby. Marty and I are dear friends. Before we started the interview, we talked about Marty Ashby for just a moment. Marty Ashby is the musical program director of Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, which is a wonderful, wonderful performance venue here in Pittsburgh. And Marty and I have been in collaboration for many, many years. And so most of the things that I cite national situations, I have to cite because of Marty Ashby. Marty has asked me to be on two of Nancy Wilson's Grammy-winning albums. I got to play with Bob Mintzer on a live album that Bob did here. And so Marty has been, again, another one of those people, Marty Ashby and Mark Taylor. I'm thankful for those two people in my life, because they have helped me present me with situations through my entire career. Marty and I are always, a new collaboration comes up. We did one of the ones that we did, which was amazing, which was a writer and performer situation, is we took the what's the Duke Ellington show that lasted only a moment, and John Latouche did the Beggar's Holiday. We took that, and that musical didn't exist except for bits and pieces. I think there was a like a piano, vocal set of tunes that came out there, no incidental music. So we actually reconstructed that entire show, and that was amazing. So I got to, and again, this is where I get to enjoy being a writer and a performer. In a lot of these situations, I'm the guy providing the charts and the guy who gets to play, which is phenomenal. And so as acts have come into town, Marty has asked me, hey, we have, such and such is coming into town. They need a saxophonist, come and play. Our latest thing, which we're working on, I don't think it's too hush hush right now. It's something that was begun before the pandemic. John Clayton was working with, to rework the Ellington's Nutcracker Suite with a dance company. And that's coming into being in October. And so once again, I thank Marty for those opportunities to play, which is amazing. So, and other than that, I've been really fortunate to go out and do my writer performer thing. Like I said, that's really that's kind of my marketing, if you will, that I've written a lot of stuff. And in fact, a lot of people are unaware that I play, really, because it's my presence as a writer is certainly well known on a national level, but as a performer, it isn't, because I just haven't gotten that many recordings out, in all honesty. In fact, that's going to change. I went, if I put my commercial in now, in January, I went back down to Virginia, back down to the source, and recorded a brand new big band album. I haven't recorded anything in 18 years under my own name.
Mm-hmm.
We've done other things. So I went back, and a lot of the guys I was in the Army Blues with, some current military band members. And I actually brought some Pittsburgh friends down too. We have, like I said, we have great musicians in Pittsburgh. I brought them down with me, and we recorded a new album of my original music. And I can't wait for that to be out, because I sort of stayed out of the performer role. This was Marty's going to put this out on MCG Jazz Records, and Marty's suggestion was, and he told me that John Clayton did this. So I thought, well, if John Clayton does this, I should do this too. He said that John doesn't play in the band whenever he does his recordings. He picks and chooses his tunes he wants to play on, and otherwise directs. And I thought that makes perfect sense, because I know for me, no matter how good the band is, if I'm in the middle of trying to solo or play, part of my brain is going, let's see, are the trumpets playing what they're supposed to be doing? How's the music happening here? What's the tempo? So I was able to concentrate on that sort of thing in that situation. So, but I did play two pieces of music that are very near and dear to my heart for my dear wife, who departed about 12 years ago. And so my heart is so full being able to put some new music out. I'm excited too that that's going to spawn some new experiences for me as a performer and my writer performer situation. So yeah, I think at the tender age of 63, my career is starting up.
I'd say it's on burner. So you mentioned something before we went on air about how many pieces you had written this year. Share that.
Yeah. So I overdid it. Having not written anything for a couple of years because of the pandemic, I tallied everything up, and I've written 75 pieces of music over the past academic year. Now that constituted, again, I keep myself very active as a writer for the students as well as the faculty. So I had mentioned our faculty concerts that we do a year. So that was 6 concerts, 8 pieces of music for each concert, that's huge fun. Again, writing for those guys is lots and lots of fun. I wrote 3 new things that the Duquesne Jazz Ensemble premiered at our annual Christmas concert that we do with all our Duquesne ensembles. I wrote 2 concerts with the music. I do a special concert for our student ensemble once a semester. In November, we presented a concert of George Benson and Stanley Turrentine music. Saluted our Pittsburghers, and I wrote, I think, 7 pieces for the big band, 1 vocal jazz ensemble piece, and 3 faculty group 3-horn things. So that was those. And then in March, we did. The other thing I like to do is, I think it's very important, which will probably lead us to one of your later questions, Nick, the idea of what's about jazz education, state of jazz education. And so one of the things that I think is important to keep us all grounded as musicians, as working musicians, is the idea of not training students to be jazz stars, but to understand the idea of sort of the workaday musician, which is what I am. I've played in wedding bands my entire career, and I enjoyed it. I never looked at that as a bad thing. I thought that was great. And so in that light, we do a pop concert every year. And so this year we chose Elton John. And so I wrote a whole concert of Elton John for big band and vocalists, and we did a couple of instrumental things too. So, yeah, so I kind of overdid it a bit, but it was very satisfying. Whenever I went back, I went, "Wow, this is great!" And of course, I just kind of brag about it, to be honest with you.
As you well should. Mike, you're an icon in our field today, and I'm wondering, you mentioned about jazz education. I know that we've both been involved through the organizations and the conventions and all of those things. And I know that you get out and see groups and hear things. So this question is a little bit on that topic. Mm-hmm. From your perspective, what is the state of jazz education today? And what do we need to do to assure its continued growth?
You know, that's a really interesting question. It's amazing, Dick and Bob, as you know, having seen this, and we've been in the jazz education situation for a long time. It's interesting how it's changed because of everything being available all the time now. It's interesting to me. I first noticed this situation in I think it was how many years ago? Maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I got to do the Yamaha All Star Band. Um, and got to see the creme de la creme. These are the kids who do the next generation band and all that kind of stuff. And it was amazing to me how well they all played. And one of the things that they cited was the fact that they always went onto YouTube and the fact that everything was there. But one of the sad things that happened because of this is we had this great divide that happens now. I think we used to have, and I'm sure you guys will agree with this, if we go back 10 years or so when this wasn't as prominent, we had a lot of kids in the middle, and we had those kids who were just fledglings. We had the really good kids. But now there seems to be a larger divide. There's an empty space in the middle. You have these kids who have become complacent because of the fact that the music's out there. Whenever we were all kids, it was difficult to get that music. You really had to want to get it. You had to find someone who had that LP. It wasn't out there available to you, you know. So you had to find someone who had that music and you had to listen to it. There weren't transcription books out there. You had to transcribe on your own. And so on one side, you have this kind of complacency because it's all there, it's all available. But then you have the kids on the other side who are just absolutely eating it up. And these are the kids I met at the Yamaha All Star Band. These kids were just, I thought, it was like, my goodness, I couldn't even gotten close to the way these kids play, you know. So I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to nurture that middle ground more. We certainly don't have the kids on the other side, but that complacency, we had to somehow replace that with exuberance and let these people know that, look, everything is out there for you and you should use it. There are backing tracks out there on every tune you could want, in any key you could want. There are videos that you can see that, and again, video wasn't even in a situation available to us whenever we were all younger, but now all these videos have resurfaced that everybody's put out. And even if the quality is not great, it's there. You actually see the performance. And even though we're talking about an oral situation, the music, especially jazz, is so visual too. Whenever you can see that the exuberance of the players, the digging in that happens, you know. So I think our goal is to try to influence that middle ground more. We're always going to have the really good kids. We're also going to have the kids who are complacent too. And there's nothing wrong with either side of that. But I think this middle ground needs to be fostered a little bit more. And so it's, you know, I hate to put it on the band directors, but I think that's obviously at the elementary maybe less, but junior high and high school level, you know, point the kids to a site on the net that says, okay, here are jazz albums you should listen to, and get them involved in that sort of thing. Now, on the other side of things, just as I alluded to earlier, is at the higher end of things, we've almost done too good a job because we've created these. Everybody writes now, as I mentioned earlier in our interview. There are so many kids who write I just listen to these, on Facebook, I'll go through and, here's another kid, 21 years old, who's written here's an album. It's like, man, this is incredible. And it's because we've done such a good job at teaching it. Now, having said that, I go back to my whole workaday musician thing too, to be a publisher. And this connects with the publishing thing too, is this artful music that everybody's writing is very, very important. But understanding the idea of writing accessible music is just as important, not necessarily for making money, but the fact that it's not all art music. I said, I'm sort of taking that old guy stance these days. Whenever I hear these amazing musicians play this flawless music in these odd time signatures, and I go, that's really incredible, but I'm missing some heart, to be absolutely honest with you. I'm missing some heart in some of what they do, So I think the idea of understanding that heart that is at the base of what this music is all about is very important, and understand the importance of playing that music and enjoying it and not being quite so serious all the time. I'm just as serious as the next guy, but it's just as much fun to play rhythm changes as it is some tune that's in 9 and whatever kind of groove we're talking. So, but yeah, I gave that some thought. I think that's an important thing. I hope that people take that the right way.
This has been incredible, Mike. I'm telling you, when we conceived of this project in the beginning, you were on my got to have list.
Oh, thank you.
And it's taken a while for us to hook up, but this is some information that I would hope every one of the educators out there interested in jazz and doing jazz listens to, because you've given them a roadmap on how to do things. And once again, you're another one of the 99% that mentions the importance of listening. Yeah. So we appreciate that. And man, you're just doing terrific. Keep it up, and God be with you.
Thank you very much, Dick. I appreciate it. Thanks, Bob. Very appreciative of you guys having me. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Mike. Thanks for sharing, and incredible, valuable experiences. To our viewers, thanks for joining us for this Jazz Zone Together interview. Please check out our entire library of interviews. We know you'll find them of real value to your program. Watch for updates as we're adding new interviews regularly. Thank you.